Recording in progress.
It is 2:00, and I will now call the Richland County Pinewood Lake Ad Hoc Committee meeting to order. As none of the people on this committee currently were on the committee previously, but as the oldest member here with the first name alphabetically, I get to be your chair for this part of the meeting. Madam Clerk, will you call the roll, please?
Terratio. Here. Newton.
Here.
English.
Present.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. The next item on the agenda are minutes. Those minutes are for information only, in part because none of us were here when those original meetings took place. And if you read the minutes, most of the content were not actually germane to the topic that we'll be talking about today, which is the dam. They just were included for your historical reference as the last meeting minutes that were here. The next item on the agenda is the adoption of the agenda. I will look to Mr. Brown and staff to see if there are any items you'd like to add.
No additional items.
Thank you. Being nothing else from our committee members, is there a motion to adopt the agenda?
Move to adopt the agenda.
Second.
It's been moved and properly seconded. Madam Clerk?
English.
Yes.
Terratio.
Yes.
Newton.
Yes.
Motion approved.
Thank you. The next item for the agenda is the election of the chair. I will entertain nominations.
Chair, I would like to nominate Shakise Newton.
Second.
Thank you. Any other nominations from the floor? All right. I think this might be the first committee meeting that was like everybody sitting side by side. It's nice to be able to make eye contact for a change. There has been moved and properly seconded to nominate Shakise Newton for chair of the committee. Madam Clerk?
English.
Yes.
Newton.
Yes, sorry.
Terratio.
Yes.
Motion approved.
Thank you. And thank you, Mr. Pugh. Thank you for your support here. I would also like to acknowledge we have two other council members present. We have Derek Pugh from District 2, and we have Bill Malinowski from District 1. Alas, that does not rhyme, but Mr. Malinowski previously served on the Pinewood Lake Park Ad Hoc Committee and also brings some historical knowledge before us. That brings us to item 5, items for action, the Pinewood Lake Park Dam. I would just like to note we have all of our information before us that's in our meeting packet as we are talking about property acquisition and other matters, that is eligible for executive session. My hope is that we can have as much of the conversation about the dam in open public session. And I will look at our attorney, Mr. Wright, that if we reach a point where you feel like we need to have executive session to receive advice for information, I will ask you to raise your hand, but otherwise would like to have as much of the discussion as possible here. With that, there's one item on our agenda. It is the Pinewood Lake Park Dam. That information is on pages 13 through 65. We do have a briefing document from staff. And so I would invite anyone from staff who wants to address the briefing document.
Madam Chair, I'm going to have ACA Eric Jensen address this item to the committee.
Okay, Eric Jensen, Assistant County Administrator for the record. Also with me today is Mr. Quentin Epps, who has been with the county for an extended period of time in the Conservation Division and who I believe will add additional color to the narrative today. Very briefly, we as staff have been in communication with the foundation, which is the current owners of the land and the physical structure that of the dam. We have discussed at length various possibilities and options for the county acquiring or not acquiring or taking other action in regards to the matter. And our recommendation from an administrative standpoint is contained within the briefing document. In addition to that, we have compiled additional information subsequent to the preparation of the briefing document, which if the committee has interest hearing, Mr. Epps has a copy of that and would be more than happy to discuss that. It is based substantially on his recollection and his information. So with that, Madam Chair, I will return the time to you.
That was a very brief summary of the brief. Thank you, Mr. Jensen.
Just to know, would you like me to go through the briefing document or is that sufficient for your needs?
I think for the purpose of this discussion, it would be helpful if you have given your observations and recommendations in the briefing document, but I think it would be helpful if you just briefly went over those because you also, as part of that recommendation, have included some information that you think would be appropriate to be included in any motion regarding the dam.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair. Then again, Eric Jensen, ACA for the record. As a brief background for the committee, and I appreciate any additional input that Mr. Malinowski and any other council members who are present at the time can add to this. The lake, the property where the lake is located is substantially owned by Richland County. The dam itself and the ground underneath the dam is owned by a separate foundation. The lake and the surrounding park area is approximately 44 acres in size. And the issue of ownership of the dam and the lake are not mutually exclusive in the sense that effectively you cannot have the lake without the dam, which I think is a very obvious observation. And so as administration, we have gone through and we have looked at the issues and we've come up with 4 points that, or actually 6 points based here in the document. One is that the lake is a current public facility and it's located in Richland County close to urban areas. The majority of the park and the lake are owned on county-owned land. The dam and the related infrastructure are owned by the foundation. Neither the foundation nor the county are currently structured to operate a facility of this size and scope. And by that, I mean that the council has not currently allocated the funds required to operate this as a full-blown typical municipal park. So in other words, if the county were for some reason to take this over, it would most likely have to allocate additional funds to operate this facility. Repairing the dam and performing related deferred maintenance will likely be in excess of $1 million. Mr. Epps prepared some documentation, some research, in which prior to the failure or the breaching of the dam, a reputable public engineer specializing in dam safety estimated it would be about $1.8 million, bless you, to perform upgrades to the dam. So this is prior to the flooding, prior to the breach. They estimated that just maintenance and upgrades were in the ballpark of 1.8 million. That was approximately 10 years ago that estimate came through. One of the observations from administration is that it's not advisable to spend public funds on improvements to privately owned infrastructure. That's just a general rule of thumb. You know, if it's privately owned, you shouldn't be putting public funds toward it unless there's some legitimate public purpose that you can elucidate, you know, to why that would be a good idea. And so based on this, the administration had several observations or several recommendations. One of them is that if the committee and the council decided that they wanted to, that it was advisable, that it was in the public interest to acquire the dam and to, make this sort of a whole, to make the project whole, so to speak, that one of them, we should look for, meaning we, the county, should look for someone to operate the facility, whether it's an internal county agency or organization or department, or it's an external one, such as the Recreation Commission or some other entity. We should identify who that is. We should get an updated engineer's estimate to know exactly what we're getting ourselves into. We should also have the plans, at least at a minimum, approved. So whatever that work that has to be accomplished is, we should know in advance what that is again, and that the construction bid should be awarded again prior to accepting the dam and any related liability. Again, that's just simply observations and recommendations from the administration. They're not things you have to do.
Thank you, Mr. Jensen. One quick question before I open it up for questions and comments from my colleagues, and that is, can you please tell the committee the amount of funds that are currently already allocated and identified for use at Pinewood Lake Park?
Yes. So again, Eric Jensen, ACA for the record. Approximately $4.5 million were allocated previously by the council. In roughly 2018, a total of 650,000 of that 4.5 million had been spent toward it. And these are H-tax funds. And so we anticipate that somewhere in the neighborhood of $3.75 million of allocated H-tax funds still exist for improvements to the park. Again, that's 4 years ago. So, but to the best of our knowledge, those funds are still being held in reserve or have been allocated. They have not been unallocated for this project.
Thank you, Mr. Dents. So again, Mr. Wright, I will ask you to raise your hand if at any point this conversation reaches a point where we need to move to executive session, but I will open the floor for any questions or comments from other committee members and other council members. Ms. Horacio and then Mr. Malinowski.
Thank you. I guess my first question, this is, there's a lot to think about here. My first question is, have we had any preliminary conversations with the Recreation Commission, for instance?
Would you, Madam Chair, may I respond to that?
Yes, I have.
Thank you. No, we have not.
Yes, I have. So there has been a leadership change at the Recreation Commission. So I think that that's a conversation to have again. But in speaking with the previous Recreation Commission and some of their staff, there was a willingness to consider operating the park. However, not if the issue of the dam was not resolved. My understanding is that this was a matter that was also brought to the Recreation Commission to see if they would consider the park maybe 15 years ago or so. But there was concern about the dam. So in its current state, the information that I had most recently received was that it wasn't something that they would consider, but that if it was repaired, that it would. Mr. Malinowski. Wait, I'm sorry, Miss Teresa, are you done?
Yes, for now, I'd like to hear what Mr. Malinowski wanted to ask.
Thank you. Mr. Malinowski.
Hey, Madam Chair, members of the committee. If you look at page 12 of your agenda, right above where it says adjournment and the vote in favor is unanimous, Mr. Pierce back in November of 2018 had stated the actual verbiage of what was voted on by council on how this park was to be managed. He wanted to see it in writing to verify what the council voted on. I think that's an important one for this committee and the entire new council to know what the council previously voted on as to management of this park. Number one. Number two, when you started throwing figures around, 4.5 million was allocated out of H-tax money. And again, that was several years ago. There was a document that showed the amount of money allocated, what had been spent, what it had been spent on, and what the balance, what any remaining funds were to be utilized for. And I think this committee also needs to see that particular document so they can see what the previous councils thought funds were going to go for. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Malinowski. Are there other thoughts, questions? So thank you, Mr. Jensen. From my perspective, I guess what I would like to add to this conversation is, we have a park that exists. It's there. We bought it. It's ours. And part, if not large part of the park and the appeal of the park is the lake and the ability to use the water. And right now, even though, and we can certainly, get a list of what the funding was allocated for in terms of being able to do additional things in the park in order to increase the enjoyment of the park. And certainly if there was anything that we wanted to do with the water level of the lake, DHEC requires that the dam be addressed. And so from my perspective, it is a public good for the existing park that we have for us to ensure that the dam gets fixed. And so to your point, I think that there are questions that we have to answer about liability. I think there are questions that we have to answer about what it would cost to repair the dam. I think it's completely reasonable that council would not want to approve accepting a property that has costs without knowing what those costs are. Nonetheless, that's what I think the appropriate action is so that we can have the park improved for the enjoyment of the public. During COVID, I think we've all seen how important recreation is. And when you look at District 11, there are actually only 2 parks in District 11 that are county parks in some way. There's Kaufman Road Park and there's this park. There's also Southeast Park, which is run by the city of Columbia, but again, it's a slightly different park and it's not ours. And so that's what I would like to see. Obviously, we want to make sure that we cross our I's and dot our T's, but at the end of the day, we have a recreational facility that's not really being able to be used to the fullest. Let me go on record. Is this ideal? No. If I were designing a situation, is this the one that I would pick? No, but it's the one that we've got. And I think that we have to address it. But I miss English, and then I'll see if anyone else has comments, questions.
I just have a question. I know Mr. Epps is here from the Conservation Commission and would like to know what role they would play. I understand the Recreation Commission, but as a Conservation Commission, how does that work?
Madam Chair, may I have Mr. Epps come and speak? And prior to that, if I may, just one quick clarification. Regardless of what we do, the consent decree from DHEC, which we have a copy of, requires that the dam be repaired. It doesn't require that we rebuild it to its previous extent, but it does have to be brought into compliance in terms of minimum safety standards. And so regardless of what is done, it has to be made safe.
And if I may, before Mr. Epps comes, just to clarify the consequences, because the DHEC has been very clear that the dam must be repaired, or if not, then what happens?
Yeah.
No, I'm asking you
yes.
to state for the record, whether we repair it or they repair it. If the dam is not repaired, what is the consequence of that?
Correct. So the consequences, if it's not brought into compliance, is that it has to be decommissioned. And effectively decommissioning means it's the water flow returns to its pre-dam state, and where the water would just simply pass through and continue in a stream channel as it did prior to construction of the dam. And so effectively, if the council and the county were to take ownership of the dam and the property, it would have different options. It would have different options, such as it could rebuild the dam to its previous extent. It could reconstruct the dam to a lesser extent. It could do a bunch of different things. So anywhere there's a continuum of options from decommissioning it all the way up to restoring it to where it used to be.
Yes, and I guess I didn't ask my question
Oh, sorry.
specifically enough. Should the county take no action and the foundation take no action, should nothing be done with the dam, then what is the action? What would be the consequence of DHEC decommissioning the dam
So
from a water level perspective and others?
Yes. So again, Eric Jensen for the record. So effectively, the lake would be drained. That's the bottom line.
Thank you.
Quentin Epps with the Conservation Commission. I'm not sure. Can you clarify your question, please, for me, Ms. English?
I was just wondering what role the Conservation Commission would play or have in this particular endeavor. How you guys fit into it?
Well, as
I know you do a lot, but
thank you. We currently manage the park as directed by council, and I can't remember the date. I think it was in 2017 from that time. And we would continue to manage the park until directed by administration or council to stop doing that. And anything that the commission itself, I can't really speak for them because they would need to vote, but they have always supported that we fix the dam. And they have supported in letters to the council that we use the money that was allocated for the park, the 4.5 million that has been previously discussed, to fix the dam. And so I believe, based on those things, that they would support fixing the dam and continue to manage the park until the county found, another resource or department or agency that would do it, and perhaps have more resources than what we are allocated to do that. Does that answer your question?
yes, it does. Thank you so much.
Are there other questions or comments before I have one for Mr. Wright? Mr. Malinowski?
Thank you again, Madam Chair. Administrator Brown, did you want to say something first?
Not first, but I did have a question when appropriate, Madam Chair.
Okay.
You can go first, sir.
All right, thank you. I'd like Mr. Epps to buy me a new car also, but that doesn't mean it's his responsibility to do it. And I think that's one of the situations we have right here, that the DHEC letter I saw was sent to this group pushing 2 years ago. And they're just coming to us now. At least we're just getting it now at this committee and then ultimately at the council level. Seems to me they haven't done their due diligence by trying to work on this sooner than now and waiting till the 11th hour when DHEC comes along and kind of gets them to the edge of the cliff and says, okay, get it done now or else. And I'd like some additional information before I would vote on this as a council member, such as when you read through the background, Scale is one that bought the property, then turned around and sold it to this park foundation, dam foundation, for a very small amount. I'd like to know when the current foundation took over this dam, what their plans were. Why did they accept the property? Why did they take it over? Or was it one of those that, well, if we take it over now, eventually the county's going to cough up the money and pay for it type of thing. So I think we need some answers from the foundation as to what they've been doing at the park with this dam. They haven't even, from what I'm seeing in the DHEC order, they haven't even cleared any shrubbery or trees that were mentioned way back when that they should have been cleared out to try to make the dam a little bit safer. So again, a lack of due diligence or care For whatever reason, I don't know, but until they can show me that maybe they didn't have the ability, but they should let us know that. It doesn't cost that much to hire somebody to come out and bush cut a bunch of stuff. I don't know what kind of funds maybe that they appropriated, and I'm going back pre-pandemic when events took place there. I'd like to see some type of financial statements. If you ran an event out there, certainly you had some type of finances as to what it cost you to put the event on. Did you charge people to come in? Where did that money come from? I think we need to see some finances from this foundation. I don't want to have the county pay in excess of $1 million and find out they're sitting on $500,000 while we're doing all the work. I think we need to look into their accounts as well. That's all I have now. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Malinowski. Ms. Teresa?
I guess as I'm thinking about Mr. Malinowski's comment, if the county were to, follow these steps where we would get an estimate and do repairs, that would basically exclude this foundation from. We would not have a relationship with this foundation. So it wouldn't, to me, in a certain way, it would matter what their financials were, because they would not be a party to any of this. Is that correct? Like, does that make sense? Like, I'm saying that regardless of what's happened in the past, we have to look at the future of Richland County and the future of this park and our, responsibilities and the public good. So there would be no further relationship with that entity. That's kind of what I'm saying.
Right. That's correct. Basically, if we take over the dam, we take over the responsibility and any liabilities, basically.
Malinowski?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Just for a little additional clarification to Ms. Teresa, I realize that if we take over, they would be out, but I'm saying we need to find out if there are any additional funds available. They are currently responsible for that. Those funds in taking over the dam, if we were to do it, those funds should also go with the dam to minimize the cost to the county. And I don't know that anybody's aware, but I'd be glad to show you. There were 19 events over in about 2 years that took place at that park. They had marshmallow roasts, movie nights, bingos, youth day, fish fries. I got them all right here, all nice color brochures. Somebody was paying for that.
We were through H-Tax.
It maybe was a tax, I agree, but there's still should be some accounting of it somewhere. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Malinowski. Ms. Teresa, were you going to say something? If not, I'll jump into the fray.
I think I'll just let that stand as it is. Thank you.
So, thank you, Mr. Malinowski. From my perspective, and I guess again to your car analogy, and Mr. Epps, you're welcome to buy me a car too. I think the difference is that this is a county park that is, it's interesting, right? So the county actually owns the lake, but we don't own the dam that provides the water to the lake that people are enjoying. And I do think it's a county park that we need to take care of. That said, I think that it is completely reasonable that there's a whole host of information that council would want before we decide to take on a park. I think it's fair to have a price estimate, for example, and if there's other information that you or other council members want to request from the foundation, I think it's fine to request that. My bias for action here would be that we send recommendation to council so that we can keep this process moving, so that we can get the estimate, so that we can engage in that process. And so that is what I would advocate for. I do, however, want to ask a question about the recommendation in the briefing document. Specifically, looking at page 15 of the briefing document, again, I certainly understand that you want to have an estimate as to how much the dam will cost, but specifically, additionally, the recommendation was not just to have an estimate, but that you actually have construction plans and bids awarded for a property that we wouldn't even own or be able to repair. So that those two steps seem, I'm trying to find the right word. Those don't seem like dependent variables to moving forward with the dam. And so it seems like they could come later. So I want to understand the thinking behind that.
Thank you, Madam Chair. ACA Jensen again. And I think incongruous was the word you were fishing for. Very simply, this current construction climate is very different from, historical climate in the sense that, prices change very quickly. And so our thinking from administration was not just an engineer's estimate, but actual construction bids would help the council know how much money it needed to allocate. But you are correct in the sense that, yes, that is an unusual ask. Typically, you would go with an engineer's estimate. You might have actual plans drawn up, or you may just have preliminary, what we call 90% or 60% plans drawn up, and then extrapolate construction cost off of that. But the only reason I think that we as administration did it was because of this unusual construction climate that we're in.
Thank you. Mr. Wright, my next questions are for you, sir. So, two questions. One is, looking at the recommendation that we have from administration, it says that were a motion to be made to look at accepting this property, that the recommendation is that that be contingent upon having a cost estimate for repairing the dam. Having that cost estimate requires the expenditure of funds. It is not free. And so my impression is that even to do that we would need to send that to council to approve the allocation of funds for an estimate. Is that correct?
Yes.
And then my next question is, can you confirm that existing dollars that are already available or entailed, for lack of a better term, for Pinewood Lake Park could be used to pay for the costs of that evaluation?
If the plan is to potentially have the dam to be, I guess, a part of the park, then it would be, it would fall in there because is for the park.
Okay.
So if the plan is to have the dam to be an addition to the park, then yes.
And so with that, are there any other questions or comments from my fellow council members? Mr. Malinowski?
I think rather than put Mr. Attorney Wright on the spot and ask him, can this be used or that be used? I think we need to get the documentation that's out there, have somebody review it and come back. There were some of those funds, my recollection was that there was supposed to be some type of entertainment center also built out there. There was, I think, supposed to maybe be built a couple additional bathrooms out there. So I think we really need to find out exactly what it is. Committees are in place to vet items thoroughly. And it sounds like right now, everybody wants to, not everybody, the comment I heard was, send it to council to keep it moving. I think it needs to be vetted thoroughly here in this committee and find out some of your answers before it gets to council. Next thing you know, they're sending it back to committee or they're deferring it for this exact same info that should be coming from this committee. So, I mean, I believe that all the questions that I asked and others were asked should be brought back to this committee and reviewed and vetted. You may find out not $1 of that excess, that additional H-tax money could be used for this. And now you got to bring it back and figure out what to do anyway. Maybe we need to look at other options as well. Right now, you've got a lake there. Okay, the lake looks nice. What can you use it for? Fishing. Okay. Maybe DHEC should drain the thing. You put a basketball courts or a tennis court or a skate park or something that could be even more beneficial to the people. I don't know. I'm just saying maybe we should look at other options also instead of just right now we're channeling everything into one item, a lake. You can fish off that lake. I don't think you're allowed to put any boats in there. You can run around it. It's good scenery, but you could probably do that with some other things too. So I just throw that out there that I don't think it should just automatically be sent to council. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Malinowski. Ms. English, were you going to say something?
Yeah, I think I've gotten confused and just need some clarification. Now, this is currently privately owned.
If I may, Madam Chair, the lake and the ground that the lake bed is on is approximately 90-something% county owned. The dam itself and the spillway and the area where if the dam should breach would flood, that is owned by the foundation separately. So the county effectively owns the lake. It just doesn't own the dam.
All of this is premature until we are the owners. I'm just asking questions.
Thank you. And I think that is what Ms. Newton, Chair Newton, is getting at, is the decision, should we, meaning we, the county, should we be acquiring the dam so that we can move forward with these other items? It's a little bit of a chicken and an egg, and that's exactly what I think the committee is tasked with deciding.
Thank you. Thank you for that clarity.
Thank you, Madam Teresa or Ms. Teresa.
Thank you. I just wanted to ask about timeliness. I know the original DHEC repair permit was 2020. There was a consent agreement in 2017. Subsequent letters in 21, and now this one in 22. What are we looking at in terms of the urgency of this matter?
Yeah, let me speak to that, Mr. Jensen,
Please.
just briefly. So, Mr. Horatio, DHEC, in a couple of conversations that I had with them, certainly they have a different take if the county is actually working to resolve this issue, rather than it being in the hands of someone who they have communicated with and has not resolved it to this point. So time sensitivity, that's something we can get into with DHEC if the council decided to do this. But it's not like if we don't do this tomorrow. But I do want to just communicate that DHEC has communicated a willingness to work with us to resolve the issue. And I think that's what's paramount, is they would rather it get resolved to the positive for the community rather than some other way.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. And that echoes the conversations that I had with DHEC. I can say my impression is if the county said, no, we're out, we're not going to do anything, at that point, DHEC would move immediately forward to decommission the dam. But as long as we are in productive conversations, for the benefit of the community, they're there. So as we look at what we might want to do to move forward, I think I've been pretty clear on what my wishes are. But again, I want to make sure that we have all the information that we need so that we can have a productive conversation with council. The challenge again is that in order to get funding approval, to get some of the information, that itself requires approval from council. So there has to be some way to address that. But what I would like to do is, Mr. Malinowski has raised some questions that he would like to see. I'd like to just take a moment and see, are there other pieces of information that the committee would like to see us gather so that we can, again, have a productive conversation with council, and that way we can capture that and see how we want to move forward.
I think that I would just, in terms of information, like to know what the engineer's estimate would cost. That would be a pertinent, I think, piece of it. For an estimate on the estimate.
And an updated engineer's estimate.
Yes.
Are there other questions or pieces of information that we would like? In addition to, I'm sorry, Mr. Malinowski, I have your notes about financial statements. So again, back to my previous question, in order for us to get an updated engineer's estimate, that requires action by council.
That's correct.
And Mr. Malinowski raised a question about, these are my words, not Mr. Malinowski's words, the level of certainty that the currently allocated funds could be used to procure such an estimate. So from your perspective, is that something that you feel confident about us moving forward with, or do you feel like you would need to do additional research before we forwarded that, if the body chose to, forwarded a request to council to ask to provide funding for an estimate?
Well, it depends on how specific the allocations were. Like it was said that this money can be used for this facility, then that can be used for that facility. If it's generally for the park, then it could be used for it. So that's the difference. Right now, I don't know. If all the money is allocated to specific things in the park, or if it's just for the park. So it kind of depends on how it was approved.
Okay. So then here's what I would suggest, because we still have time before we forward something to council. I would move that we direct the county attorney to, to investigate the allocated funding for Pinewood Lake Park and specify the uses for which those funds can be used to specifically include, in addition to whatever else, to specifically include potential estimates and other matters related to the acceptance and repair of the dam. You want to?
Right. The only thing is that I don't think that's appropriate for my office to do. I think that would be for the
how about I change that motion to direct staff, whichever staff it is, from whichever department it is, I'll let y'all duke it out.
And once they get it, they can have it reviewed by my office to take a look at it. But I think that the investigation or the finding out the information is that's taking the purview of my office.
Thank you. At this moment, that is noted, but it will require a second to live on.
I'll second that.
All right, Madam Clerk, it has been moved and properly seconded to do the thing that I said. Do I need to repeat that?
Amen.
Thank you. And actually, let me amend my motion, if I may, to go ahead and address Mr. Malinowski's concern, that we do the thing that I said, and also request that staff request information from the Pinewood Lake Park Foundation about their financials so that we have that, and in any previously performed maintenance on the dam. Would that address the questions that you raised, Mr. Malinowski? Would the seconder of my motion accept that amendment?
Absolutely.
Thank you. Any other discussion? All right. Hearing none, Madam Clerk.
Teratio,
Yes.
Newton,
Yes.
English.
Yes.
Motion approved.
Sorry, I'm not expecting us to go not alphabetically, so my brain was waiting for something else. Are there any other items that we need to discuss related to the dam, or while we're gathered together? I see you there. I'll refer to my colleagues. If there's any other information that you want to present to us or feel that we need to discuss. If it is all right with you, Mr. Wright, I first want to acknowledge my colleague, Mr. Malinowski. Or Mr. Pugh, were you waving for yourself or trying to get my attention from Mr. Malinowski?
I was trying to get the attention.
Mr. Pugh from District 2, thank you.
He was helping me.
Yeah, Mr. Malinowski.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just so that y'all know, because you weren't here when all this action took place to obtain the park, well, I may seem somewhat critical and requesting of specific information. I did vote for the county to purchase this park back when it did take place. So I did support it. And I just want to make sure we're doing it right again. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Malinowski. And if I may say, I think that we're 100% on the same page and making sure we're doing the right thing for the taxpayers. And I also want to make sure that that includes the right thing for the health and recreation of the community as well. Mr. Wright, are there any comments, concerns, questions that you want to bring to us, either in open or executive session?
No, just one question is there an actual document where, as far as the offer that the foundation has made?
It's the letter that was included in the packet.
So just the letter?
Yes.
Okay.
Mr. Brown?
And Ms. Newton, that's what I was going to say earlier, I think, and I'm assuming that everybody reviewed that and saw that, but as we were discussing it for the general conversation, I noticed that we never talked about, why one entity had a park and how it got to us having this discussion. So I thought that was something that we might want to mention, and you just asked a question about it. So,
do you have a mic, Mr. Brown? Would you like to give that?
So very simply, because you've talked about this already, the foundation had the part of the land that we're talking about now. And while there was discussions previously about the county doing work in that area, at that time, the foundation was not willing to give the land to the county or even potentially sell the land to the county at a rate similar to which it was acquired. But recently, after a number of discussions over a couple of years of dialogue between Ms. Newton and various members of the foundation, myself, being contacted, they came back and they submitted this letter saying, we are willing to do these things, which includes providing the park to the county, the land that we have. So that's how they got to you all as a committee to now potentially look at, now that there's a potential reality that the county can get the park, it won't have to pay for acquisition of the park. It would just have to do what it will with it once it is acquired. It was appropriate now at this time to bring it to you. So that's how this got from someone else has it to now the county is considering actually what it will do if it decides to accept this parcel. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Yes, there have been a lot of requests and questions to me from the community about why aren't you raising the level of the lake? Why aren't you doing these things with the dam? And the answer that I always gave is because DHEC requires a certain water level, and we cannot change that until the dam is fixed, and the county cannot fix the dam if we don't own the dam. And at that point, the foundation was not able to provide those fixes to the dam. So thank you for getting us here. And again, for those of you who aren't familiar with the park, it was mentioned earlier that there is an easement over the spillway. The vision, of course, is that you would be able to have a lovely stroll around the lake. And right now, you can't get the lovely because of the vegetation that's in the body of water. And you also you can stroll on the parts that the county has, but because the easement is in disrepair and is part of that consent decree, you're not allowed to complete that around there. So we are gathering that information. And in that process, there was something else that I wanted to ask you if you could research, Mr. Brown, but unfortunately I forgot what that was. So we do have a motion for staff. I would love if that's something that could happen sooner rather than later, as we are the possessors of all of the information and all of the documentation, so that we can schedule another committee meeting to discuss that. If there's any additional information that you think would be helpful for the body from a historical perspective that we have about that, I think that would be great too. Are there any other questions, comments, concerns for the good of the body that we want to raise?
Move to adjourn.
Ian, is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and properly seconded to adjourn. Madam Clerk?
Teratio,
Yes.
Newton,
Yes.
English.
Yes.
Motion